one. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We have 92 people checked in and almost 250 registered. So we're going to wait just a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. You can see the agenda on the screen. And I will open the meeting in a couple of minutes. What is this? For some reason, my name is showing Rebecca McKean. I don't know. Do you see that in the chat, Ava?
See what?
Oh, it's a direct message to me. The wrong name is showing. A friend of hers.
Okay, so if people want to rename themselves, they can click the three dots that are in the upper right-hand corner of your picture, and you can choose to rename yourself. You right-click on the three dots and then go down to rename. If somebody is having trouble, you can message me in the chat.
That's Ava Farkas, our all-around tech person and our staff liaison. Okay, I think we'll get started. We have almost 125 people in the room. Welcome everybody to our February 3rd, 2025 chapter meeting. I'm Ann Friedman and I'm the chapter chair. I'm here with Bonnie Nelson, the secretary, and Diane Mena, our vice chair, and Ava Farkas, who is our staff liaison. Every year since we've been in office, we usually have at least one program that is run by, well, not totally by the anti-racism committee of the chapter, but with our subcommittee and the program committee, we put on a program. And the program today is going to feature Brenda Greene, who is going to talk to us about James Baldwin. Why are we talking about James Baldwin? Well, he was a fabulous writer and activist, but he was born in August, I think, of 24. And so we're right smack in the middle of the Baldwin Centennial. And that's the genesis of today's program. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Brenda Greene. Dr. Greene is a professor of English and founder and executive director emeritus of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar Evers College, CUNY. Professor Greene's research and scholarship include African American literature, composition, and multicultural literature. She has edited several books that include The African Presence and Influence on the Cultures of the Americas, Resistance and Transformation, Conversations with Black Writers, and Rethinking American Literature. And she has written extensive essays and book reviews in English studies. For more information, you can go to her website. I'll read it slowly. www.drbrendamgreene, Greene with an E at the end.com. And we'll try to put that in the chat. So Brenda, welcome to the Retirees chapter. Brenda is on Travia and is looking forward, I'm sure, to joining our chapter once she's officially retired. So Brenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to have this conversation. And a special thank you to you, Ann, as the president. So greetings, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names. And to begin, Nobel laureate Toni Morrison said at the funeral of James Baldwin, "You gave me a language to dwell in, a gift so perfect, it seems my own invention. Your life refuses summation. It always did, and invites contemplation instead. You made English honest, genuinely international. You stripped it of its ease and false comfort and fake innocence and evasion and hypocrisy." James Baldwin was born August 2nd, 1924, and was an iconic author for our time. He died December 1st, 1987. Over the course of his 63 years, he penned over 30 poignant essays, short stories, novels, plays, and poems. His poetry and prose were exceptional, and he is well known for books that include Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, Another Country, and the plays The Amen Corner and Blues for Mr. Charlie, and of course the essay collection, Nobody Knows My Name, and The Fire Next Time. James Baldwin saw himself as bearing witness. Our writers have always given us ways to expose the truth, to explore our joy, our pain, our fear, to bear witness to our stories, to reclaim and complicate the past, to offer counter narratives, to raise awareness of critical social and political issues, and to enable us to confront the deepest part of ourselves, our secrets, our anxieties, our personal and collective memories. James Baldwin was one such writer, a provocative and master writer who used his personal life to provide social commentary on race relations, culture, family, and identity in America. In essence, James Baldwin made the personal political. His works speak to issues that haunt us today. There are many ways to enter into the life of James Baldwin. My presentation will focus on how Baldwin's work illustrates a tradition of activism. There's a history of activism among Black poets, novelists, essays, and scholars, and other writers in America, beginning with Phyllis Wheatley and continuing with the abolitionists, Frederick Douglass, Linda Brent, David Walker, Charles Chestnut, Ida B. Wells, W.E.B. Du Bois, Nikki Giovanni, Farah Jasmine Griffin, Edwidge Dundercat, Michael Eric Dyson, Cornel West, Margaret Walker, and John Oliver Killens. We have read and studied these writers who have used their pen as tools of liberation and as instruments for social change, and whose work represents a critique of the social and political landscape and consciousness of our nation. Their texts represent a legacy that stimulates the imagination and intellect and calls for action and resistance. Theirs is a literature that raises an awareness of our responsibility to actively embrace civic engagement. Many of these writers have been part of the National Black Writers Conferences held at Medgar Evers College. We can look to our writers for how we move forward and examine how they create, and as John Lewis would say, make space for good trouble. I'm going to share the screen now. Okay. Okay. So James Baldwin, as I said, writer as activist, is the subject of my talk. He was born, as I said, in 1924. He has over 30 essays and novels and plays and essay collections. Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. In this collection of essay, Baldwin captures the complexities of being Black in America during the first rumblings of the civil rights movement in the 1950s. Through his observations, Baldwin both lamented the injustices in the African American community and showed empathy for the oppressor, establishing himself as a key voice in the movement. On writing about a racial incident that left a permanent impression on his life, Baldwin states, "I had been living in New Jersey, working in defense plants, working and living among Southerners, white and Black. I learned in New Jersey that to be a Negro meant precisely that one was never looked at, but was simply at the mercy of the reflexes the color of one's skin caused in other people. I acted in New Jersey as I had always acted, that is as though I were thought a great deal of myself. I had to act that way, with results that were simply unbelievable. I had scarcely arrived before I had earned the enmity, which was extraordinarily ingenious, of all of my superiors and nearly all of my co-workers. In the beginning, to make matters worse, I simply did not know what I had done. And I began to wonder what anyone could possibly do to bring about such active and unbearable vocal hostility. I knew about Jim Crow, but I had never experienced it. I went to the same self-service restaurant 3 times and stood with all the Princeton boys before the counter, waiting for a hamburger and a coffee. It was an extraordinarily long time before anything was set before me. But it was not until the 4th visit that I learned, in fact, nothing had ever been set before me. Negroes were not served there. Here's an excerpt from another essay in this book. He's reflecting on his father as he attends his funeral. It began to seem that one would have to hold in the mind forever 2 ideas which seemed to be in opposition. The first idea was acceptance, the acceptance totally without rancor of life as it is, and men as they are. And the light of this idea was of equal power, that one must never in one's life accept these injustices as commonplace, but must fight them with all one's strength. The fight begins, however, in the heart, and it now had been laid to my charge to keep my heart free of hatred and despair. Baldwin also attended a conference on Black artists, African Americans, and Africa in his essay called From Princes and Powers in Notes of a Native Son. He speaks of the relationships and the politics between Black writers, artists, leaders, and African artists, writers, and leaders. Yet, in speaking of the relationships between politics and culture, he pointed out that the loss of vitality from which all Negro cultures were suffering was due to the fact that their political destinies were not in their hand. A people deprived of political sovereignty find it very nearly impossible to recreate for itself the image of its past. This perpetual recreation being an absolute necessity for, if not indeed, the definition of a living culture. Africans in Africa were not in control of their politics. And so it was very, very hard to take power and to control the politics that they were subjected to by those countries considered more powerful. He continues with, Europeans never had any intention of raising Africans to the Western level, of sharing with them the instruments of political, economic, or physical power. They emerge for what they are, a mirror of our confusion, dishonesty, panic, trapped and immobilized in the sunlit prison of the American system. And then you've heard people refer to Richard Wright's novel as the protest novel. Baldwin writes an essay called Everybody's Protest Novel. This is something I was not even aware of until I went back and refreshed my mind. He critiques Uncle Tom's Cabin. His overall view of the protest novel is, this notwithstanding that the avowed aim of the American protest novel is to bring greater freedom to the oppressed. They are forgiven on the strength of those good intentions. Whatever violence they do to language, what excessive demands they make, credibility. And he says of Native Son, these novels of oppression written by Negroes, which add only a raging near-paranoid proscript to this statement and actually reinforce the principles which activate the oppression they decry. Richard Wright was a supporter of James Baldwin, but when he saw this essay on the protest novel, he and James Baldwin separated their ways. It created a barrier. I found it really interesting what he said about Uncle Tom's Cabin. He compares Uncle Tom's Cabin to Little Women because of the sentimentality, the ostentatious parading of excessive and spurious emotion is the mark of dishonest, the inability to feel. The wet eyes of the sentimentalist betray his aversion to experience, his fear of life, his arid heart. And it is always, therefore, a sign of secret and violent inhumanity, the mass of cruelty. He says, Uncle Tom's Cabin is a catalog of violence. And he says of Harriet Beecher Stowe, Harriet Beecher Stowe was not much of a novelist, but rather an impassioned pamphleteer, nothing more than to prove that slavery was wrong, was in fact horrible. I don't know how many people have read Native Son. Which functions on Bigger Thomas, who committed this atrocious crime. And he says of Native Son, all of Bigger's life is controlled, defined by his hatred and fear. And later his fear drives him to murder and his hatred to rape. He dies, having come through this violence, we are told, for the first time, to a kind of life, having for the first time redeemed his manhood. Biggest tragedy is that he has accepted a theology that denies him life, that he admits the possibility of being subhuman and feels constrained. Therefore, to battle for his humanity according to those brutal criteria bequeathed him at birth. The failure of the protest novel lies in its rejection of life, the human being, the denial of his beauty, dread, power, and its insistence that it is his categorization alone which is real and which cannot be transcended. And he wrote that in 1949. So just some of the essays. And I'm moving now to the next one. Nobody Knows My Name. More notes from a native son. Its focus highlights the complexity of a discriminatory tensions in our society. It's a collection of 23 culturally reflective essays, and he highlights tensions that are still relevant today. Many of the titles appeared originally in other publications, including Esquire and the New York Times Magazine. And the essays earned him another spot as a finalist in the National Book Awards in 1962, this time in the nonfiction category. He begins with a letter to his nephew. I think about Ta-Nehisi Coates in Between the World and Me, that helped us to understand what it means to be Black in America. It helped Blacks and whites to understand the root of race relations. It helped us to understand why many Blacks turned to the Muslims in order to feel more humane. And I'm going to continue with The Fire Next Time. The Fire Next Time is comprised of 2 essays that were originally published in the New Yorker, My Dungeon Shook Letter to My Nephew at the 100th anniversary of emancipation. He wrote that 100 years after the emancipation was declared. And also Letter from a Region of My Mind, which explains both the place of race and racism in our society, and also examines Christianity's role in American beliefs. At this time, the critics saw this collection as a way for white Americans to finally get a look at what life was like as a Black citizen in this country. He covers topics such as his meeting with Robert Kennedy and thinking about Black freedom movements. And the title from the books comes from a couplet in a spiritual, Mary Don't You Weep, an African-American spiritual, and another one, God Save Noah, the rainbow sign. The quote is, God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water, the fire next time. What made Baldwin's essays really effective was that they were testimonials. Again, making the personal political. He gave testimonial evidence about how racism in America has operated in real people's lives. And that was an effective strategy for connecting with an audience that was not aware of this. It had not thought about it. There's a line in the essay, The Fire Next Time. He says, in order to deal with the untapped and dormant forces of previously subjugated, to survive as a nation, America will be forced to re-examine itself. We are here now. We're being forced to re-examine ourselves. He stressed in the letter to his nephew the importance of white people accepting him, of he accepting them. He says that Black men were taught not to look at one another in the eyes. He tells his nephew about America's ability to destroy Black men and challenges his nephew to convert his anger due to his mistreatment as a Black man into having a passionate and broad look on the African-American experience. In another essay called The One Down at the Cross, Letter from a Region in My Mind, he addresses the detriment of Christianity on the Black community and his journey from becoming or being a teen pastor to completely pulling away from the church because it felt like a repression of his experience of humanity. That was during the time when he began to think about sexuality and his conflicted feelings. And as I said previously, he talks about Elijah Muhammad, who educated many people, who educated Baldwin and hoped to get him in the movement. He says that Black Muslims have made a Black God to avoid the oppression of a white God that Christianity has established within the Black community. So as I said, it was a real critique of Christianity. The goal of the book, or the essays, was to liberate the country from its crippling habits and attitudes. No more water, the fire next time. What will happen if we don't change the nature of race relations in this country, if we don't recognize what the Black man, woman, child has endured? You've heard about the famous debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley on the role of race in the American dream. It was held at Cambridge University. And the question for the debate was, is the American Negro at the expense, is the American dream, at the expense of the American Negro? Baldwin, as you can imagine, won the landslide majority of 380, with the ayes receiving 544 and the noes 164. You can watch this on YouTube. It's really, really interesting. And it came at a significant time, several months before the signing of the Voting Rights Act on August 6 in 1965 by Lyndon Johnson. One of the statements he made in this debate that resonates for me, and if those who grew up in the 50s and watched the Westerns and were rooting, those who were rooting for the white man against the Indians or Native Americans, he said he realized that in those Westerns, the Indian was actually him. He understood the significance of the white power domination at that time. Oh, the evidence, the evidence of things not seen. The evidence of things not seen is really his take on what happened to the 28 Black children in Atlanta who were found murdered. The murders took place over a period of 22 months in 1979 and 1980. And he examines this incident with a skill of the reporter. He notes that this happened in Atlantic, a city that claimed to be too busy to hate. The Wayne Bertram Williams was arrested for this. And in writing this essay, it's also in a book, he addresses the realities of what it is like for a Black child. Now he says it's terrifying for a Black child in white America, where too often public officials ask the real questions about justice for all. So he takes a very time-specific event, such as the murders, and uses it to look at race in America through a lens that's very disturbing. I Am Not Your Negro. This is the documentary film from director Raoul Peck. And I'm sorry. Peck was a Haitian filmmaker. And this movie, it's a documentary, is really a kaleidoscope of American culture. He says that you can see in this story, the story of the Negro in America is the story of America, and it's not a pretty story. He was motivated to return from Paris when he saw what was happening during the civil rights era. And he envisioned this as a book about his friends, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Medgar Evers. He never finished the book. So Peck was given the unpublished manuscript by Baldwin's sister, and he called it Remember This House. So you have a series of notes and interviews and letters. Peck published this. You can also get it in a book form, but it's really powerful to watch it on film. The film was nominated for an Oscar. So in reading about this book, you really get a sense of the thoughts. It feels like you're in Baldwin's mind. When he met Medgar Evers, he was lecturing, and Medgar Evers was sitting in the front row. The death of Medgar Evers had a profound effect on him. And he remembers Medgar Evers saying that he could only be free in battle. He was not free to rest. As you know, over the course of 5 years, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King were assassinated. Medgar Evers in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, and Martin Luther King in 1968. None of them lived to be 40 years old. And Baldwin saw it as his responsibility to write their story. He saw their deaths as symbolic of a betrayal in this country. And he concluded that whites had to save themselves. He talks about the relationship between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, about the fact how initially Malcolm X called Medgar and Uncle Tom. I'm sorry, I keep saying Medgar, called Martin Luther King and Uncle Tom because of his nonviolent stance. But as the movement developed, Malcolm and Medgar became closer. They both were interested in stopping the violence in Vietnam and in the war. One of the interesting items in that film is his discussion of their friendship with Lorraine Hansberry, who's also a radical activist. Imani Perry has a book called Looking for Lorraine, The Radiant and Radical Life of Lorraine Hansberry, which received a number of awards. And in that book, she describes that relationship. There's also a production which has been produced by several people called Sweet Lorraine. And it imagines a conversation between James Baldwin and Lorraine Hansberry when she's in the hospital dying of cancer. I think I saw a production of it by Woody King. Go to the next one. So in this book, I'm going to say, well, where do we go from here? How do we move
Dr.
forward?
Greene, I think you're still on the last slide.
Excuse me?
I think you're still on the last
Okay,
slide.
yes, okay, sorry. Where do we go from here? How do we continue the tradition of the Black writers, activist tradition? And I've named some books. The Most Dangerous Man, it's a play by Amiri Baraka. Woody King produced it. W.E.B. Du Bois is accused of being a communist. His passport is taken away, and he's rejected by the NAACP and called the most dangerous man in America. And it's really interesting because he was a co-founder of the NAACP. The Matter of Black Lives, writings from the New Yorker, is edited by Jelani Cobb and David Remnick. The first essay in that book is an essay by James Baldwin. It gives you really a nice trajectory of essays that have been written by Blacks over the years. Create Dangerously, The Immigrant Artist at Work is one of my favorites by Edwidge Dondercat. We used that as our first book when COVID hit and the Center for Black Literature decided to have a book club. We invited Edwidge to come to our first meeting, and that was the first book, when she talks about the importance of the writer and writers always resisting and understanding what it means to put their lives on the line and to resist. Eddie Glau has done a lot of work on James Baldwin. I suggest if you want to find out more about Baldwin and get an analysis, you look at Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Life for Our Own, and also We Are the Leaders We Have Been Looking For. That is his most recent book. My colleague, Alice Greene, passed away last summer. She is the former executive director of the Center for Law and Social Justice in Albany, New York. We Who Believe in Freedom is her memoir around activism and the struggle for social justice. And it's very moving. She grew up in what's called the North Country and talks about the discrimination she faced. But in Albany, she just became very active in the prisons. I think she ran for lieutenant deputy mayor or something, or one of those positions. And she died unexpectedly this summer. Breathe, A Letter to My Sons is a very moving letter by Imani Perry, reflecting on what it's like to raise two Black youth in this country. And then The Fire This Time, A New Generation Speaks About Race, which is edited by Jesmyn Ward. When Black Lives Matter erupted, she wanted to do something. And she called together many writers of this current generation, and they contributed short stories, essays, poems about where we are in this particular moment. It's a tribute to James Baldwin. And so I'm ending of my response when number 45 was elected in 2016. And the president of the college called a town hall meeting to discuss the events and reflections on the presidency. As you know, many people were shocked. And I wrote a letter I shared with my colleagues and my students. I said, as I reflect on the legacy of Martin Luther King, the events of the last 2 months in particular, and the last year of the insidious rhetoric, racism, and sexism that we were subjected to and witnessed, I know that we are at a pivotal moment in history. I have spent the last 2 months in mourning, not by the acts that we have witnessed, during the campaign season and reminded of the dramatic rise in race riots and lynching during the post-Reconstruction era in our country. While the election results were coming in on the evening of November 5th, my students were writing papers on Charles Chestnut's novel, The Marrow of Tradition, an historical novel which presents a fictional account of the Wilmington 1898 riots and the impact of the white backlash after Reconstruction. My students informed me that the parallels between the racial and political climate of the country at the turn of the century and what they were witnessing in this current racial and political climate were incredulous. The results of this election and the rise in racial incidents subsequent to the election have been surreal. We are once again, in my view, and in the view of my students, witnessing how people in our nation have responded to their perception of a loss in power, changing demographics, and the fact that a Black man has been president of one of the most powerful countries in the world. These post-election results and incidents represent white backlash in the making. As President Obama reminded us in his farewell speech, race still remains a potent and often divisive force in our society. We are not there yet. We do not live in a post-racial society, and we have more work to do. And then interestingly, I write a book review column once a month for Our Time Press, a local newspaper mostly distributed in Brooklyn. And they asked me to be prepared to write a response on the results of the election in 2024. I wrote, or I should say penned, 2 possible responses, and I just could not believe it. Had to be in that morning. So I sent this in. The 47th president, how do we move forward? The outcome of this election speaks to the state and temperature of our country. To elect a convicted felon and a man who has attacked democratic values is frightening. In the words of a colleague, the people in this country re-elected number 45 with eyes wide open. Vice President Kamala Harris ran an excellent campaign despite being confronted with misogyny, racism, xenophobia, and lies from the mouth of a man whose campaign attempted to create a sea of fear for voters. Her resume, her credentials, her qualifications, and the excitement she created within her base speak volumes. I feel for her. She was more qualified than any presidential candidate that we have had for decades. It is clear that our country was not ready to vote for women. There are forces in place that will do all they can to ensure that this does not happen. We saw the role that gender played in Hillary Clinton's campaign. And in the case of Vice President Harris, we cannot discount the fact that both gender and race played a significant role in its outcome. The outcome of this election signals a day of reckoning in our country and is traumatizing for many. It confirms the stark reality that racism and sexism are part of America's DNA, and that we are still reeling from the backlash that erupted after 2 terms of President Obama. However, the struggle for freedom is never ending, and we must move forward with intentional and deliberate speed. Thank you.
I don't know if we can unmute people. Everybody's on mute, so I'm clapping for the body. Thank you so much, Dr. Greene. That was a very comprehensive, touching overview of James Baldwin's life, and all one has to do is turn on the news or pick up the newspaper if you can bear to look at it and see that we are definitely not in a post-racial society. And we're going to have to organize and work together to do something about that. So thank you so much. I'm sure we have some questions, comments from the audience. You have time to take some of those?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so if you want to speak, ask a question, or make a brief comment, please raise your Zoom hand and I will call on you in the order that I see you. I think everybody maybe needs to take a breath here. Anybody?
There was one question in the chat.
Uh-huh. What was that?
Let me find it.
I see this. He's known as a leader and for the gay community. Can you say anything about his role?
Okay.
And I know you mentioned, it's really interesting that in my research, I found that although he is known as a leader and people in the gay community have really embraced him and seen him as a symbol for LGBTQ rights, he really did not talk about it much when you look at his research. Giovanni's Room is probably the book that epitomizes what he's thinking. But when he came back from Paris and became involved in the civil rights movement, much of his work ended up focusing on the politics and what was going on. Then he does not deny that he's gay, but I've not seen evidence of him really speaking about it a lot. There's some allusions to his ideas around gender and sexuality in the talk he does with Nikki Giovanni. You can get that online. That was when, I don't have the name of it, but if you look at the conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, he talks about gender roles and the roles of women. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Cecilia McCall and then Evelyn Rich. Cecilia? Can we unmute?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
She's muted again. Maybe I can.
You can. What's going on here? Ava, can you help us?
I unmuted, yeah.
Okay,
go ahead.
Okay, all right, Cecilia, go ahead.
Hi, Brenda. It's good to
Hi,
see you.
good to see you too. It's been
Yeah.
some time.
Yeah, long time. You said when in his piece, The Fire Next Time, that he said white people in America will be forced to re-examine themselves or itself. And it seems to me that white people in America have done that, and that they've chosen to deny race relations, what race relations are really like in this country. And I think we're experiencing now a white backlash against the Black community at the highest levels. It's occurring. And with his fixation on DEI, if you had watched the Emmys last night, Felicia Keys said that DEI is a gift to this country. It has been a gift to this country. And because it's been a gift to this country and has been successful and brought Black people to the fore, I think Trump feels he now has to turn all of that off. And he's doing it quite forcefully. And I don't see a backlash to any of that occurring right now. And I asked a question the other day of some friends, where is the leadership going to come from to confront what's happening right now? I personally don't see it. Maybe you have an answer to that.
I don't see it either. I think you made some good points. I'm concerned. There's a part of me that's saying there's some people that are saying you know, you give him everything and let him fall. He's pushing back. He's throwing everything out there that he can to illustrate that he is on his way to establishing a dictatorship. I shared a link with Ann. We have Hakeem Jeffries, who'll be speaking at Medgar College on this Friday. He has a new book called The ABCs of Democracy, and he'll be in conversation with Lori Daniels Favors. I think that I'm really curious to see what he has to say, because I've not heard much from him. You know, I did see that Marjorie Greene wanted to ask him to apologize for his criticism of saying we're going to fight against Trump's agenda. But I think it cannot be any one person. You know, Eddie Glau says we are the leaders we've been waiting for. I think it has to happen on multiple levels. It has to happen in our organizations, our civic engagements. We have to do something in the schools, in our churches. I think we just have to align ourselves with people who can push back. And you're right, there's nothing like we saw the push in 2016. And I'm concerned, but I haven't given up, because we have a history in this country of fighting against discrimination, fighting against disparities and equities. And I just think people are gathering the steam and getting in place. So I'm thinking about how I can be involved other than the writing I do. I think that's what each of us has to do. We have to call it out. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, you know, and I'm just watching. I watch what he's doing. It's like, I got away with all of this and I'm president. Let me see how much more I can do.
Thank you. Evelyn Rich.
Brief comment about James Baldwin's activism. Thank you so much, Dr. Greene, for sharing with us excerpts from some of the literature which he has left us. Too few people, though, are aware of his real activism. In 1960, when the sit-in started, my husband, Marvin Rich, was a key player in the Congress of Racial Equality Corps, and in the subsequent sit-ins, which started in 1961. James Baldwin called Marvin and said, I've been reading about what's happening and I'd like to know what I can do. So he came to one of our core meetings, and the result was that he decided that he would accompany me on trips to Long Island, where we met with residents there who were quite wealthy. They listened to him as he did not read from his books, but talked about the things which motivated him to write those books. It was my job to do what we call the pitch, which is to ask for the money. After he spoke, we raised a lot of money, or at least what we thought was a lot of money, because we had none. So I want to leave you and your audience with the notion that activism has many forms, and that James Baldwin indeed exhibited throughout his life examples of some of those forms.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're right, he did become a member of CORE. And when we think about him, you know, the first thing, when I initially thought about him, the first thing that came to mind is, you know, go tell it on the mountain. I didn't think about all of the activism until I began to do research and went back to reading The Fire Next Time. It was going to be a conference, which was later canceled in southern France. But when you initially think about it, you don't think about his activism. I once taught Baldwin. I was a visiting professor at the College of Staten Island, and I assigned Go Tell It on the Mountain and Giovanni's Room. And the students were really upset. I don't know if you know about the population at Staten Island. They were really upset. They didn't want to read any books about a gay man. And they were bored by Go Tell It on the Mountain, which really is, the story of his life. But when we normally are introduced to him, we're not introduced to his activism. That's why it was really refreshing to see Jasmine Ward say The Fire This Time, and to see references to Baldwin now. And it's just so important in the celebration of the 100th anniversary. He's getting his due around all the things that we did not know about as in his later life during the 80s and 90s. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Eleanor Campbell is next, and I also see some questions in the chat. It would be easier if you raised your hand if you're asking a question. Otherwise, we'll read them from the chat after we go through Eleanor and then Dave Cuddlechuck. Eleanor?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Greene, for your presentation. I have a question and a comment, I guess. So my comment is, Baldwin left the US and went to live in Paris because he couldn't deal with the racism in this country. And then, of course, during the height of the civil rights movement, he returned, as you presented. I'm wondering what you think he would say right now in regards to the situation in the world, because I believe that the energy of the universe is what also fuels the movement and change or revolution, in the fact that now there's so many countries where there are dictatorships and there's racial strife, including Paris, including lots of against Muslims. And so it's starting again worldwide. And I don't know what, I know it when he went to Paris, he said that, American blacks were not the underdog. It was the North Africans.
Right.
Were.
And still is.
Yes, and still are, and it's gotten worse. So I just wanted to get your comments about that.
I think that Baldwin would say, it's not the fire next time, the fire is here. We are here. And what can we do about it? And we have to continue to call people out and to bear witness and to engage in whatever radical acts we can to expose the fact that Americans are still being subjected to racism, inequity, discrimination. We're heading toward a dictatorship. And I imagine that he would align himself with organizations or groups that are doing the work to call that out. I have a feeling he would not be writing novels. I think he would be out there, as our colleague just said. I just forgot your name that quickly, about calling the core leader to say, what can I do? I think he would be out there, because it's not a fire next time. The fire is here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dave Cuddlechuck and then David Hatchett.
Okay. I really enjoyed your talk. I wondered if Dr. Greene is aware of any really good full-throated defenses of DEI. I mean, the president has attacked DEI, like yesterday, saying that having the astronauts reflect American society is discriminatory. I mean, he said that yesterday, and he does makes all of these racist statements. But I haven't seen anything addressing the fact that DEI programs are important and what role they play. Are you aware of?
I've seen
aware-
many essays, opinion essays. You know, I can't name any one book right now,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of information out on the internet about the value of DEI. I suggest you look at some of the organizations like the Center for Race Relations.
Okay.
You know, it's at the University of Texas. And I
Okay.
think they put out a statement. So there, of course, the NAACP has put out a
Yeah.
statement. There are organizations putting out statements. And I listen to a lot of radio. There are a number of the Sirius station, XM station that gives a lot of information. The urban channel on Sirius XM.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
I think that you just have to really look at it. I heard someone talk about I was looking up the name as I was talking. Just heard a woman speaking about a book on white wealth and privilege. She came out. So it's just really doing the work to look, you know, it's out there. But thank you.
Thank you. Dave Hatchett?
Hello, Brenda.
Hello, good to see you, David.
Pat, congratulations.
I'm on my way, following you.
I was about to, I wanted to say congratulations on your retirement. And I wanted to ask, I see y'all ask you a couple of things, but I wanted to ask you, who is sponsoring that event on Friday with Hakeem Jeffries, and what time is it?
It's the Center for Black Literature.
Okay.
And the office of Hakeem Jeffries, they came to the Center for Black Literature and asked us to sponsor it. So it's at 6:30. It's very tight time from 6:30 to 8. And there will be books for sale. He will not be signing books. He's going to sign books before. But it should be a really exciting evening. The MC for the event is Eldroy Reed, who's the president of the Brooklyn chapter of the NAACP. And if you've ever heard Lori Daniels Favors, she is really a good moderator. So
It's going to be at the Founders?
Founders Auditorium, we're expecting a big crowd. So
All right.
hope to
Good to
see
see you,
you
Brenda.
there.
Good to see you, Brenda.
Okay, you too.
Dr. Greene has sent me that information, David, so I could send it on to you, and anybody else who wants the details, just write to us at retirees@pscmail.org. I don't see any other hands, but I do see some questions in the chat. Connie, do you want to ask this, or you want me to read it? Connie Jemison is asking about Baldwin's English writing teacher was Abe Meeropol, who wrote Strange Fruit. Was
Oh.
Meeropol an influence on Baldwin's life?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that life, but I'm sure Strange Fruit was.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure that was, and Nina Simone, of course.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm sure
Strange
that
Fruit.
was influence. Music was also, you know, important to him.
Karen Anderson is asking if you're familiar with Baldwin's collaborative essay with Richard Avedon entitled Nothing Personal. She says she's had it for decades and reads it often.
I'm not familiar with that, but I definitely will take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah. There's because of the anniversary, I feel I'm getting something every week about the celebration of Baldwin and his work. So it's really good, as I said, to see this. and to look at him in a very much more holistic way. But I'll take a look at that, nothing personal.
Okay, I'm just taking a quick look. Does anybody, Bonnie or Diane or Ava, do you see? Oh, I see Cecilia's hand again. Cecilia.
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that 2024 was the 100th birthday, was James Baldwin's centennial. And the New York Public Library, the main library at 42nd Street, as well as the Schomburg Center, have had major exhibitions about him. And I think if you want to see that, you have to get there by the end of this month. I think both of them are closing down at the end of February.
Yeah,
Right.
I saw the one at the 42nd Street Library. It's a small exhibit, but it's very impressive. And well, we're also going
Schomburg
to
has a room devoted to his writing.
say that again. I'm sorry.
Schomburg Library has a room, a
Okay.
room dedicated
Okay.
to the exhibition.
Okay. And we are going to be reading. We have 20 plus people who have signed up for a book group with our chapter. We're going to be reading Go Tell It on the Mountain, starting on February the 13th. I see Ava, I see Myra, and I see Manfred Phillip.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, another question in the chat was from Sarah Wilkins, who asked, which publications or publishing houses were the most open to publishing Black authors, especially during Jim Crow and pre-civil rights?
I would have to do the research on that. I know that many publishing houses it's an ebb and flow with publishing houses with respect to Black authors. And I imagine that there were few because they only let one or two be published, the most favored at a time. You know, when Richard Wright came, he was hailed, and then James Baldwin. And then you saw an upswing in a number of books being published on the movement in the Black Lives Matter. So I think, and right now we're seeing a decline. So I imagine the same thing as we run in ebbs and flows, and there's always backlash in this country. We now have a situation where Black writers are being disinvited from speaking at programs. And Black writers are having challenges getting their work published. So I imagine it was the same then, particularly as he became more active. In fact, there are some who have said that his writing was not of the same quality after he became involved in civil rights. But I personally think that was a reaction to not wanting to read about these very difficult and uncomfortable subjects for some people. They would rather read the story that doesn't directly impact on them, as opposed to looking at what is really going on in this country.
Okay, thank you. Myra Halbin. Myra?
Sorry. The Central Library in Brooklyn has a James Baldwin exhibit on of his 10 years from 1961 to 71 when he moved to Turkey. So it's quite a terrific exhibit. He got out of a writer's block, started finishing books that he had started, and it will be on until March 5th. As you come into the Central Library near Grand Army Plaza on the main floor, it's all James Baldwin.
Okay, thank you, Myra. Manfred and then Lisa Flansreich.
Thank you. I particularly am happy to have seen the references to the New Yorker articles in 1963, which I recall reading. But I really don't have a question. I just wanted to point out to Anne that Ellen Mosen James, who doesn't know how to raise her hand, I think in the chat, has a question. And I happen to see it. So that's all I want to say.
Can you ask it or read it?
I don't know her question. I just saw her raising her hand trying to ask a question. I just wanted to alert you to that.
Okay, well, after Lisa asks her question,
Of course.
tell me the name of this person again.
Ellen Mosen James. I don't know her personally, but I saw her trying to raise her hand.
Okay, well, that's very nice of you, Manfred. I can't see it in the chat.
Whatever.
Maybe somebody else has caught it. Lisa,
Thank you.
Lisa Flansreich?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so okay, can you talk a little about his emulation of Henry James?
Can Dr. Greene talk a little about the emulation of Henry James? That's the question.
Yes.
I'm not sure what.
Well, he emulated Henry James, the
In
writer.
terms of his language?
I mean, you know, like he did emulate Henry James, the writer, didn't he?
I can't speak to that.
No.
I've not studied that.
Okay.
I know that he read extensively,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that was one of the writers
Mhm.
he would have looked to, but he read extensively
Okay.
and probably has many writers who influenced his work.
Mhm.
I just want to say too that someone mentioned about the ACLU and CIA that putting out a strong statement. They have a lot of information out, particularly about what to do regarding the immigrants, what
Yeah.
immigrants can do. So I just want to support that. As I said, organizations are putting out statements, but you have to look very pointedly at what they're doing.
Okay, I think Bill Friedheim, you'll be the
First,
last
Ellen
question.
Mosen James is unmuted now. You can ask a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
okay. Ellen Mosen James and then Bill.
Thank you. I really just wanted to thank you so much because your presentation sent me back, maybe it's 60 something years now, to 1961 in a humanities class where our professor who was teaching us Milton put down the book and said, I need to talk to you about something else. And he went into James Baldwin and some things about his work right at the time. And he told us that Malcolm X would be there at the college to have a debate with Willoughby Abner. And a whole bunch of us went to that debate. And I just remember a room full of Black Muslims, the women in their robes, and I had never seen anything like it. Oh, he also talked about prison and Malcolm X, and it was things that I ended up following threads on throughout my life. And I'm not going to try to go through it here, but I will try to write it up in celebration of his 100th birthday and maybe put it out there somewhere. So I really thank you for evoking that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Where did you go to school? That
University.
was very courageous for that to happen during that time.
It was University of Chicago.
Okay.
The professor's his last name was Levine. And it was Chicago. It was, you know, Elijah Muhammad and all the things
Yes.
right there that this brought to my attention, which it would not have happened if this professor had said, I can't do Milton today, even though he was a Milton scholar who was getting to talk to us about Milton. He changed track. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ellen.
You're welcome.
Last question is going to be Bill Friedheim.
Can I just interject, Ellen, if you write that up, please send it to us and we might be able to put it in the newsletter, okay?
Yes.
That's a big if at this point.
If.
Could happen.
All right, I know Diane's going to take down your name and pursue you, so it might not be so easy to beg off now that you've whetted our appetite.
Off. It's just a matter of doing it.
All right, Bill, you're the last question. You have to unmute, Bill. Or we have to unmute you. Can somebody do that?
I asked him to unmute.
What's happening?
Or maybe he's trying.
Okay, I'm
Okay, there you
unmuted
go.
now.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
Dr. Greene, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And I know the last person who just spoke, talked about first inspired by another professor. In fact, I wish I was a student in one of your classes. I would love to be at Medgar Evers and be in one of your classes. I mean, this was just so wonderful. And also, as somebody who now in their 80s, goes back, 60 years ago, when a professor first introduced me to Baldwin and Go Tell It on the Mountain. Such a powerful, powerful work. And since then, I've read so much more of Baldwin, and I'm going to join, Anne just said that a bunch of people in the retirees chapter are going to go read and discuss Go Tell It on the Mountain, and I will join that. Yesterday I was thinking of going back and rereading Go Tell It on the Mountain. Now I'm definitely going to go
Now you
back.
can read it. You can read it with all of us. Just
I
send a
will
message.
go tell it on the mountain. And I also remember in the 60s, you mentioned those famous debates at Oxford University, where Baldwin basically ran circles around William
Yes,
F. Buckley. I mean, and as you say, that's now available on YouTube, and people should check that out. And they should also check out that movie from what was it, 2017, the documentary about Baldwin,
yes.
which is just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Uh, and how so vital Baldwin was. And I also want to kind of identify with you, and I want to identify with Professor Glaub at Princeton University, who you just cited, I think, a couple minutes ago, that maybe some of the people we're looking for new leadership are among us. I
That's
mean,
right.
and I think that's right. Yes, I mean, particularly, African American colleagues, but whites, all of us. I mean, I think each of us in our own ways, this is the period of time where we've got to step forward
Okay.
and take on, what's happening today. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was just so terrific.
Thank you, Bill. And
Thank you.
we're going to save the chat, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
The kudos are just, lining up one after the other. I know it's hard to sort of think on your feet and look at the chat at the same time, but we'll save it and we'll get it to you. And, thank you so much. Once again, a very rich, thought-provoking, presentation and a message to us, which I think we know that we are going to have a lot of work in front of us to keep the kind of society that we want to see. And the union has a number of different projects in the offing. Somebody mentioned immigration. There's a lot of stuff we're going to be doing around immigration. So thank you so much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the program. We're going to hear from somebody about the new hearing aid benefit from the welfare fund. And then we're going to hear a little bit about copays from Debbie Bell. So I thank you again and look forward to your becoming a full-fledged member of the chapter when you're fully retired, and you'll get a feel for what that's like on Travia. So thank you, everybody, for your questions and your comments. And I think we're going to move the agenda now.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for your questions, comments, and remember, we are the leaders we have been waiting for. The struggle continues. Thank you.
There's no rest for the weary.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So,
And we had one question just about how people can sign up for that book group if there's still
okay. Well, the
space.
book group is just about filled. If you want to sign up for the book group, you should email Doris Hart, and Doris's address, I had it, and I don't know what oh, here it is, Doris. Gloxy, GLOXII at yahoo.com. And if you're having trouble there, just send the message to us at the retirees at pscmail.org, and I'll get your names to Doris. I can't promise. I see Doris has her hand up. Doris? You have to unmute. Doris is organizing the book group. And if you could put your email in the chat, that would be good. Okay? So
Can you hear me?
now we can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we're fully booked.
Oh, they're fully booked.
Bill Friedheim is the last person who signed up, and we're just fully booked at this point.
Okay.
Oh,
There will be other
Bill,
opportunities.
you have to sign up.
I'll sign up.
Bill will
Okay.
sign up.
I'll sign up.
Okay,
I'm
there will
sorry,
be
folks,
other
we're-
opportunities. We're also going to, in the fall, do something with films related to racism, and I finished the book. I don't know, Cecilia, I'm not sure what you're asking. We're gonna have to move on. And I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, but no, I lost it. Mr. Tacone or Taccone or Tachoni is here to talk to us about True Hearing, the new hearing aid benefit. Is he here? Michael Foley, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Who was that?
So this is Anthony Taccone.
Anthony Tacone. Okay, I'm sorry if I
So I actually
mispronounced.
have, I'll be running the presentation, the PowerPoint, but I have Michelle who will kind of talk through it. So she should be on too.
Who?
Her name's Michelle.
Well, has she been?
Can you tell
has she
me
been
her last
signed into
name
the
so I
meeting?
can unmute her?
Michelle Rosander. Let me see what her name is on this. Could be
Okay.
different.
I just made her a co-host, so she should be able to unmute herself.
Okay,
Okay.
All right, success.
there she is.
Okay, thank you. All
Okay.
right. Ready when you are.
All right, Anthony, do you have the screen share ready?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Welcome to the retirees chapter of the PSC.
Thank you very much.
And
We
I'm
are
gonna take a quick run and get my husband who wants to hear this.
perfect. That seems to be how we get many of our customers. Our family cares as much about us as we live in denial at times about hearing loss, and so they often are the ones to push us to do something about it. But I will continue on while she's running to
No,
get
I'm back. He's not here.
on here. Okay, well, we'll send you some information.
Yes.
So welcome and good afternoon. Thank you for attending the True Hearing PSC CUNY webinar. First, we'd like to introduce ourselves and thank you all for participating. My name is Michelle Rosander. I am the National Sales Director at True Hearing. With me, Anthony Taccone is our National Account Manager. Below our names, you will see our email addresses, and this presentation will be available to you all. We put them there just in case you have questions. We are the team that handles the account for True Hearing and for PSC CUNY at the Union when there are questions or concerns. Additionally, what I would ask is if you have your cell phone nearby or a pen, that you jot this telephone number down. This is the designated number for PSC CUNY members to call to make an appointment for hearing tests or hearing aids, or if you have questions or need assistance about along the way with your hearing aid journey. So it's always nice if you can just jot it into your phone, put True Hearing there. That way it's handy and readily available because it is actually a specific phone number set up for your members. so we know who you are when you call. Next slide shows our agenda for today. Our team can talk hearing care all day long, I can tell you that. But today we have about 20 minutes to give you a brief overview. Hopefully you like the information we're providing, and maybe we'll get to come back and pick another topic and go over some more information. There is quite a bit to learn in the hearing care world, especially if you don't have hearing aids. And there's so many people out there that need to treat their hearing loss, but just really avoid it. So today we want to go over the coverage that you have through your union benefits, and then how to use our program if you've not used it before. Then we'll introduce our audiologist who will go over hearing health and wellness with you, as well as some technology. Also, one of the newest and latest topics, over-the-counter hearing aids. Though they are not covered in the PSC CUNY benefit program, a lot of people wonder about them and may have family and friends that ask about them. So it'll be a little bit of information about that as well. At the end, we'll have a Q&A, and we'll also have a final question that we'll ask you to participate in. And the first 5 people that answer that correctly will be mailed a little prize from True Hearing. Next slide. So the mission at True Hearing is to reconnect people to the richness of life through industry-leading hearing health solutions. Next slide. Last April, the Board of Trustees decided to contract with True Hearing. Previously, you had another national network, Care USA. This change provided many improvements for the membership. True Hearing has a much larger network, giving you more access to providers. True Hearing has 8,850 provider locations nationwide that are credentialed through our NCA credentialing process. And we provide a designated number, as I mentioned, for members to make appointments. We also have designated customer service hearing consultants to support members throughout their journey. And additionally, True Hearing, good news for all of you who had asked, will be contracting with the audiologists at City University of New York. We have been working together with them to add them to our network, and that should be complete, we expect, by the end of the month. So if someone prefers to use one of those providers instead of one of our national providers, then they would be able to do so. So we're happy to say we heard you, you asked, we listened, and that is coming soon. The way to make that appointment will still be to call that designated number, because we will check the eligibility files and process you through the program.
Could one of you post that number in the chat?
Sure.
I can put it
Yeah,
on there.
we'll have that designated phone number throughout the presentation as well, multiple times. So it will end with that phone number as well. Okay. True Hearing is ranked #1 in provider and patient experience. That was from the last slide, but it's okay. So we definitely have a great customer experience for you. Next slide, sorry, Anthony. Your union benefit covers $1,500 per year every 3 years. True Hearing does not charge you for the hearing test, so therefore there is no barrier for you to come in and find out if this is something that you need. We did recognize with a lot of our union programs over the years that copay was something that prevented people from moving forward on something that they really didn't want to do in the first place. And so we really want to get you a baseline, get you to understand whether this is something that might be a problem for you and something that might be able to help you. So you have an annual hearing test at no cost to you included. This chart should be familiar to you. We've done a few mailings with PSC CUNY. It's also available on the website, but this shows your pricing breakout, although it probably needed a little bit more explanation. So that's what we're here to do today. You'll see here on the left column that the technology level is listed. And then that starts at the basic, there's a value level product, a basic, a standard, advanced, and premium. There are over 1,000 hearing aids in those in those categories under the top 6 manufacturers that are at the very bottom of the page: Signia, Oticon, Phonak, Widex, Resound, and Starkey. They are the top 6 manufacturers in the world, and they have the best products and outcomes. And so those are the products that we are able to offer to membership. We know that when you just walk into a provider on your own, you are at risk of paying high prices, high retail prices for those hearing aids, and your allowance may not go as far. So we were able to work with PSC CUNY, provide them with a discounted flat fixed price for each level of technology. So you'll see that under the True Hearing price. Then your union per ear will pay per ear the amount below in the column where it says fund pays. And the great thing about this change this year is the only hearing aids that have any out-of-pocket cost are the name brand premium hearing aids, and they're now down to $299 each for the same aids. We do bring new aids in every time a manufacturer releases them to the networks. So we have updated products from the latest generations. And we also added a True Hearing white label advanced and premium hearing aid to the mix, so that if you wanted a premium hearing aid and brand wasn't important to you, you could do that through the True Hearing program without paying anything out of pocket. You show up, if that's the hearing aid that you and the provider agree upon, you get that in the program, and you don't have to pay anything, submit any paperwork, or wait to be reimbursed, as long as you are eligible for the benefit that is provided by the union. So I think those are some really great advancements. And Erin, the audiologist, will be speaking later on about some of the technology. So I will let her further that conversation for you. The next slide is that our hearing aids come with some inclusions that we do not sell to you. They're included and bundled in with your program. Online, there is a free hearing screening. That's a quick tone test to see if maybe, for example, your husband might be struggling and you want to prove it to him that he needs to make an appointment. So you could literally pull up your co-branded landing page on your website from True Hearing, which we will provide to you today. Put on a pair of headphones or earphones and do the screening, and it will identify whether or not it might be a good idea for you to come in for a test. I always say to everyone, the test in the soundproof booth is the gold standard. If you think you have hearing loss, even if this screening doesn't show anything popping up, there's so many other areas that it's not screening that you still should come in and get that baseline. Everyone should be getting a hearing baseline. Most people, if you ask when the last time they had a hearing test is, they tell you, when they were in elementary school. We really should be doing this as a standard of care yearly. This comes with a 60-day no-risk trial period. And that means that if the member needs to exchange their aids, they started with an in-the-ear model, they want to switch to a behind-the-ear model. Maybe they've gotten a model that has batteries because they thought that's what they were accustomed to, and they realize that the streaming is running the battery out too much when they're streaming Bluetooth. They might switch to a rechargeable model. We want you to be happy, and we're giving you 60 days to assess that, come in, talk to the provider, and make sure you're in the right aids so you keep them and you use them. Comes with a full 3-year manufacturer's warranty. So you get hearing aids every 3 years. So you're covered for warranty items all the way through the time. And then at the end of the 3 years, you're eligible again. It also comes with 3 years of free batteries if you have a non-rechargeable model. If you have a rechargeable model, obviously these models plug in. Rechargeable hearing aids don't need batteries, okay? And then we offer 1 year of follow-up visits. Again, very important that you follow up with the provider, get your hearing aids cleaned, get them checked, make sure you understand how to use them and all the features possible. So we don't want to nickel and dime a member. We want to make sure that the member is actually very comfortable with their hearing aids during that time. So there should be no barrier to that. I will say, and I know the audiologist today will be telling you, you've got to wear them for the good majority, if not the entire day, every day, to get the best experience. I see so many people getting aids and then they put them in for a couple hours and they say they can't hear the way they wanted. Please be sure to wear them if you get them as many possible hours as you can to get that great experience. Next slide. All right, Anthony's turn.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So again, the first thing I want to highlight is just the phone number. So if someone can beat me to it, if you want to type that in the chat, that's your dedicated PSC CUNY phone number. But also it's essential that you use the phone number to access your hearing coverage through True Hearing. That's the number that's dedicated for y'all. That's your first resource for anything that y'all need. So I'd highly, highly recommend saving that. And like I said, if no one puts it in the chat, I will. When you call, a hearing consultant will ask for some basic information to verify your benefits. They'll confirm your eligibility using your last 4 digits of your social and just your date of birth. The consultant will then explain the program, answer any questions you have, and assist in scheduling a hearing appointment with the local provider. Phone call, it's a very short phone call.
Anthony, what is the member ID again? Could you please repeat that?
So it's the last 4 of your social security number and your date of birth.
This is how they look you up in the system so that they know whether you've used your hearing aid benefit in the past and whether or not you're eligible.
Mm-hmm. And let me assure you that they do not ask for the whole thing. It's just the last 4. Then after the initial phone call, the visit. So during your visit, you'll receive a comprehensive hearing exam that typically lasts about an hour. The provider will conduct the hearing test, like Michelle said, in a soundproof booth. If needed, they'll recommend customized hearing aid solutions. Hearing aids come in various sizes, styles, colors, and levels of technology. So there are options to suit your needs. Once the hearing aids are selected, you'll place your order with the provider and make your payment. Hearing aids usually take about 3 to 5 business days to get back to the office. Once the provider receives the hearing aids, they reach out to you, have you come back in, and then they do the fitting.
Just to step back, True Hearing makes all appointments for you. They register you, they send the provider your appointment information and your coverage information. So that's why it's really important that you go to True Hearing, because if you just show up at a provider or you call a provider and you make an appointment and they don't realize that you have a union benefit, that delays your process of your appointment. You may end up having to go to another appointment before they get that verified. So we want to make sure that you're on the smoothest path. So we can't reinforce it enough that that telephone number is so important. Go ahead, Anthony.
And then the follow-up. I think Michelle kind of touched on this a little bit already, but this is basically where they walk you through the fitting, how to use the hearing aids, adjust them if needed, and just ongoing education when it comes to using the actual hearing aids. So that year free follow-up visits is very, very important as well. But the follow-up is pretty simple. You just go back to the provider when you need things, and they can help you kind of work through whatever's kind of going on there.
I did see a quick question in the chat that popped up. We will have a Q&A at the end, but certainly it's a very good question, which is, can I go to my own provider or do I have to use the True Hearing providers? And the answer to that is your provider may already be in our network, but you must go to the True Hearing provider in order to get the price points and the program and the benefit amount of $1,500 per year. There is many of the providers that were in the past network are in pretty much almost every single one of the providers that was in the past network is in the True Hearing network. The Care USA centers are part of this network and many, many more. So if you just go to your provider and you don't make that phone call first to see if that provider's in the network, again, that experience goes a little bit backwards in that now the provider's gonna have to call us and you're gonna be sitting there waiting. So we want you to have that smooth experience. We can tell you what providers are in your network, what, according to your zip code, what is the closest. And if you have one that you wanna ask about, our team is ready to look that provider up and make sure that they're credentialed and accept our program and our price points so that you get that full benefit. If you should decide to go off on your own and go somewhere that's not in our network, there is only a $500 out-of-network reimbursement. Now that we have the True Hearing products in and all of these other benefits in this program where you don't have to pay up front, I really struggle to find out why anyone would want to go out of network, but it is something that we won't, that's not prevented. You can choose to do that. It's just that the allowance is $500 total every 3 years. Okay.
Yep, just use that phone number if you have a question about providers.
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Erin Downard. She is our Doctor of Audiology. She's also our Provider Engagement Director. She works at True Hearing now, but she was a provider in years past, and I'll let her talk a little bit about herself and give you more of the educational component about our program.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? I just give you a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So as Michelle mentioned, my name is Erin Downard, and I am a doctor of audiology. I have practiced in a variety of clinical settings, including private hearing clinics, VA hospitals, ENT clinics, working with both pediatric and adult populations. And I currently serve as the Director of Provider Engagement here at True Hearing. So today I'm here to talk about a couple of symptoms that often coexist with hearing loss. So first I want to focus on the mental health. You can see that stat right there. Those with moderate or worse hearing loss have 2 times greater odds of experiencing anxiety and depression. That is quite a big number considering the already anxious-ridden world we live in. So the question becomes why? Why can hearing loss have such an impact on our mental health? And I always use examples to help understand this. If someone has hearing loss and they're in a social situation, let's say they're out to eat with a spouse, they have to work extra hard to hear because they have hearing loss. The person with normal hearing sitting across from them, it becomes it's second nature. They don't have to think about listening so hard. But when you do have hearing loss, you're missing parts of words, speech, sentences. So your brain has to actively fill in those gaps of what you're missing. We call that auditory fatigue. And as a result, they have to put in extra effort to simply just hear, something that comes naturally to those with normal hearing. So that person might get home from just a simple dinner with their spouse and think, why am I so exhausted? All I did was enjoy time with my loved one, having a nice meal, yet all I want to do is lay on the couch. That auditory fatigue plays a role in, the rest of their day, or it can. Another situation is hearing loss is hidden. Nobody can see that you have hearing loss. It's therefore often mislabeled as you're simply being rude. Maybe it's an attention related issue, an intelligence related issue. When someone doesn't hear you and you ask for repetition, the first reaction, unfortunately, is usually annoyance. Why aren't they listening to me? Even in the profession that I am in, I am guilty of this. If my husband and I are shouting back and forth across a room or through walls and we don't hear each other, I get frustrated, which is not fair to either of us. So people with hearing loss, they can sense this frustration on, usually from the other parties. And that can often lead to some tension, maybe even arguments, or my favorite approach is the smile and nod. I didn't hear what happened, so I'm just going to smile and nod along. And soon enough, you've just agreed to do something that you have no idea what, or maybe that you particularly didn't want to do. So regardless of how someone deals with hearing loss, it can be very lonely and isolating. Eventually, they stop wanting to contribute to the conversation because it's not enjoyable for them to only hear half of what's said or to have to keep asking for repetition. And those situations are going to build up over time and can have a great impact on your quality of life and your mental health. So really, by treating your hearing loss, it's so much more than just simply hearing better. So let's switch gears a bit and talk about tinnitus. So tinnitus, you may have also heard it pronounced tinnitus. There's no right or wrong way. And what is tinnitus? It's simply put, it's an audiological and neurological condition experienced by more than 50 million people. And it's the perception of a sound when no external noise is present. So I'm actually going to play this quick video clip. I won't play the whole minute, but just to give you an idea of what tinnitus might sound like to the average person.
I think you have to share sound for us to hear it.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Question.
Anthony, if you're not able to do that, we can move on.
I don't know how to share the sound. And
That's okay. You know what? It might have had, if any of you were wearing earbuds, it might have had you want to rip your ear out of your ears.
That's true. Yeah.
But essentially, ringing in the ears is most often what we hear this termed as. But I always like to say it's not always ringing. Tinnitus can manifest different perceptions. Some people hear buzzing, hissing, whistling, swooshing, clicking, you name it. But most commonly, it does present as a ringing in your ears, and it's often a high-pitched ringing. Now, what causes tinnitus? We'll go to our next slide here. Tinnitus.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Now we can hear it.
And now we all have hearing loss. So
Yeah. Sorry, everybody.
all right. So tinnitus, it's most often a symptom of hearing loss, but you don't have to have hearing loss to have tinnitus. Right here, you can see some of the most common causes of tinnitus. Noise-induced hearing loss is going to be your number one. Noise-induced hearing loss can happen from something quick. Firework went off beside you, a gunshot went off, you went to a loud concert, so on and so forth. It can also be noise over time. Construction workers, veterans, those populations have some of the highest incidences of noise-induced hearing loss simply because of the profession that they're in. And of course, we have aging, head injury, blockages in the ear and sinus infections, blood pressure. And then, of course, there's certain medications that can be toxic to the ear. We refer to that as ototoxicity as well. So again, just something to be mindful of if you are having some ringing in your ears or tinnitus. Get that hearing tested. It's always wise to at least have that baseline and see where you're at. If it's hearing loss does not seem to be the cause, then you might have to look in other directions. All right, so let's move to the next slide. So I'm not going to get too into the weeds here on hearing aid features because I love hearing aids and I could talk about them all day. But most of them now have extra features that are going to promote overall health and wellness. I myself, I have a Fitbit, I have an Apple Watch. Wearables are everywhere nowadays. And a lot of the population, that's something we seek out. So if we can put a lot of those features into a hearing aid, something you're already going to wear, it makes it that much more appealing. Again, we want to address the hearing loss. That's our number one concern. But by adding some of these other features, you're going to get a little bit more out of that purchase and that investment. And the best part about these features is some of them can do it all. And there's also hearing aids. If you say, I don't want to have to mess with that, I don't want anything to do with it, they can be turned off and you don't have to use them. So you can kind of customize that to really what you want to get out of a hearing aid there.
Erin,
right, yes.
One of the questions here is, would you quantify the comment moderate hearing loss? So could you?
Yep, moderate hearing. So there's a little bit of variation. It's going to come down to decibels, but moderate hearing loss is typically anything above 55 decibels and worse. Again, some clinics might be a little bit more conservative and say about a 50 decibel cutoff. Others might be a little bit more liberal, but that's kind of your range. And if you've ever had a hearing test, they test each individual pitch or frequency. Just because you hear normally at one pitch doesn't mean you don't have a moderate hearing loss at the other pitch. A sloping hearing loss is very common, where you hear low pitches better than high pitches. So that could qualify if you go, again, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but if you have a hearing test done, you could have certain thresholds or pitches that fall into that moderate range there too. So it's a wide range. I hope that answered the question. I can't really see the chat coming through, Michelle. I know we have Q&A at the end, but feel free to interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to technology. So a lot of questions about hearing aids come with the cost. If you've ever done any research on hearing aids or been into a clinic or you wear them now, you've probably noticed that there's a vast difference in price range. And if you go back to that slide Michelle presented earlier, you saw there was different price amounts for the different technology levels. When we talk about technology level, we're talking about the computer chip inside of that hearing aid. So a hearing aid could look exactly the same, value versus premium, but that doesn't mean they're doing the same types of things. So again, I'm not going to read each of these bullets here, but essentially the higher in technology, the more the hearing aid is going to do, and therefore those are going to be your higher price points. Now, fortunately with your guys' program, you can get 2 premium hearing aids for $0 out of pocket. That is a phenomenal benefit. I truly wish when I was practicing, I was able to give everybody that, because unfortunately that was a time when insurance didn't cover a lot and people simply had to walk away. They wanted the help, they needed the help, but they simply couldn't afford it. So I am so happy that programs like this exist. Technology level, though, a lot of it's going to come down to the lifestyle that you lead. What types of environments are you in? Are you mostly at home in quiet one-on-one conversation, maybe some TV, quieter lifestyle? You certainly could maybe get by with one of the lower technology levels. Vice versa, if you are active, you enjoy going out to eat, you spend time with friends and family, you're exercising, you are in social situations a lot, you likely are going to be a better fit for more of the premium style or one of those top 3 tiers. It's really important, to listen to your provider's recommendations, but it's also important to express your wants and needs to figure out what's going to be best for you. There's not really a one size fits all. For example, what I would want out of a hearing aid might not be the same as my neighbor. So just know that you have these options. And again, going back to your benefit with that $0 out of pocket for premium, I would always recommend the best, because it's sort of like a why not? If you can get the best and afford the best, I would go premium, even if you do lead a quieter lifestyle, because it's just going to be better sound quality, which is going to lead to better satisfaction, less having to fiddle with it, so on and so forth.
We're coming close to our end, so just
Okay.
want to see where we're at.
I was going to say, I have one more slide, I believe, here, which actually I can kind of skip to if we just want to go right to the end.
Yes,
This is pretty.
please.
Yep. Go ahead, Anthony.
So our final, Anthony, if you just quickly, what information do you need to provide to True Hearing to make an appointment? If you want to put an answer into the chat, we will be sending out some prizes to the first 3 people that answer this question correctly. This also has your designated phone number again, if you missed it. We want to thank you very much today for listening in. We're happy to do another one of these in the future if you found it helpful. Additionally, there were a couple questions about features. We certainly can respond to the questions that were in the chat in writing and send along a little bit more information that might answer some of those questions for you. And we'll have Anne work her magic to get them followed up for all of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. We appreciate you and your help today.
Thank you for coming. Any questions? Okay, well, I'm looking forward to giving you guys a call and have my hearing test and maybe a little bit of a reality check. Here's one question from William. Are you guys still here? Yeah, William Laziza. William, you have to unmute.
Is he the one asking about channels?
I don't know what he's asking.
William, can you unmute? Yeah. There you go.
Hi. Yeah, I was the one asking about the channels. What's the deal with that?
Do we have time to place that answer, brief answer?
I can quickly do my best, or should I put it in the chat for time purposes?
I think in the chat would be good.
Perfect. I'll do my best.
Because we're running 5 minutes to 3 and we have another important issue to deal with on copays. Shauna?
But do you want to have them answer that?
I thought we're going to put that in the chat. The answer, Erin's going to put that in the chat. Shauna?
Shauna, can you unmute?
Thank you. Trying to unmute. Yeah, quick two-part question, and the answer in the chat would be great. One is there any connection or relationship or hereditary between you and Here USA? And the second part of that is my provider, my audiologist told me that the reason Here USA could give us great bargains was because all the technology was old. It was always like getting last year's car model, and that was the whole basis of the business plan. So I'd love to hear if that's true or false and why, and if there's still a connection there.
So can we get the answer in the chat?
Well, maybe that would be faster if there's a brief answer orally.
Okay.
I was going to say, Michelle, did you want to take the Here USA, the
I'll
correlation
take
there?
the correlation in Here USA, and we certainly always provide our updated product list to the board. So there are very updated product that are available every year. We only at True Hearing keep the latest 2 generations, but we
Okay.
can provide that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And somebody asked where she can get a list of providers.
And Anthony answered that we don't publish that list because it outdates itself weekly as people move, pass away, quit jobs, etc. So the best way to be sure you have a provider is to call us, and we will look at our most daily updated list to ensure that you have the most credentialed providers and the most available providers.
Okay, that's good. That's reassuring. Okay, well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Michelle.
Yes.
And thank you, Erin. I'm sure you'll be hearing from our members. So do some people answered the question for the prizes? I don't know how you want
Yes,
to do
we've
that.
quickly written their names down. We have 4 here. We're happy to send a prize to all 4. I have Anthony Colios, Cecilia McCall, Helen Papa, Havalas, and Marianne Pita. Yeah. So
Okay.
we will reach out to the retiree group or to Michael to get addresses to mail those items out.
Okay. All right. Great.
Look for them. Probably take a couple weeks by the time they go through the U.S. Post Office, but we'll get them packaged up and out to you. Thank you.
Well, we will be waiting with bated breath to see what goes on. Okay, thank you again.
Thanks for participating.
Thank you. Is Debbie here?
I am here.
Debbie is here. Okay. Debbie,
I'm gonna, it being 3 o'clock.
Yes.
I'm gonna do the short version.
Okay.
Because the news on copays is not particularly positive. So this issue applies to retirees who are 65 or older and have Medicare, and have senior care, Emblem's senior care, as their supplemental insurance, which of course is most of the PSC's retirees, but not everybody. So those of you who aren't affected cannot worry about this. I was going to describe Medicare in some detail to kind of explain how this is working, but I'm going to do the short version, and then Anne asked that you bring me back next month, because by next month, more people will have been to health providers and have had experience with whether they have to pay copays or not. So why is that? At the beginning of the calendar year, Medicare is set up where there's Part A for inpatient hospitalization, Part B for outpatient providers, Part D, which is your prescription drugs, which we can ignore because that's covered by the welfare fund. We're talking about Part A, outpatient health providers, doctors, labs, physical occupational therapists, diagnostic radiology, that kind of thing. Starting January 1, senior care has been authorized to allow those providers to charge you a $15 copay for each visit. As Bonnie has tried to clarify for members, a blood test is a visit, even if they do 20,000 tests on the blood they draw. It's still one visit. That being said, there are plenty of retirees who have outpatient health provider appointments multiple times a month, so that the cost associated with this new copay is going to be very burdensome. The not good news is that they are going into effect. There is little, the city of New York claims it's going to save $40 million on the cost of senior care, and they have shown no appetite to withdraw this concept. The unions have pressed New York City and Emblem to start documenting the savings, because there is some skepticism about how much money will be saved. The other thing to understand about the start of the calendar year is that there is in Medicare Part B a deductible. So at the beginning of the year, this year it's, I've got to get this accurate, $257, right, Bonnie? Deductible. So the your first outpatient health provider cost that's $257 or less will come to you to be paid. After that, Medicare begins to cover your 80% of your outpatient health provider costs. Senior care covers the additional 20%, but senior care also has a deductible, which is an additional $50. So the first few bills for January, will probably come to you from the providers to be paid until you've covered that total of $307 of deductibles to the two plans. The other thing to keep in mind when you get bills is that Medicare sets a rate. Medicare sets a rate for what it will pay for each of the services, regardless of what the provider charges nominally. Assuming you are being given care by a provider that accepts Medicare, and you should pay attention to that when you change providers, that provider has agreed to accept the Medicare rate. So Medicare then pays 80% of its own rate, GHI pays 20%. And what is now going to change is that of that 20%, each of us will pay $15. Now, the biggest problem is going to occur because some of that 20% will be less than $15. And so we are, the welfare fund staff and I are working at the city and at Emblem for how to help people get their money back if, in fact, the 20% charge is less than $15. This is not going to be easy. Therefore, the reason I'm going to do a short version today is to tell you to start keeping detailed track of all your medical costs. How do you do that? I don't have a share screen. This is mine. Medicare sends every 3 to 4 months what's called an explanation of benefits.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like this. It says it's not a bill. It comes from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Hold on to it. I will be honest, I do not completely understand this explanation of benefits when it's sent to me. It's very cryptic. Emblem Health also sends an explanation of benefits frequently if you're seeing a lot of providers. And they explain how much they have paid of what you've been charged. Again, the categories and the dollar amounts are rather cryptic because in fact, they don't tell Emblem doesn't tell you what the Medicare rate is and only tells you what it's paid. So to figure out there are two things going on. One is if the 20% that Emblem pays is more than $15 for a healthcare visit, outpatient healthcare visit, it's going to be your $15 and then Emblem pays the difference to the provider. And that we're stuck with for the time being. But as I say, the unions are insisting that Emblem prove that they're really saving money and that the city prove that they are using the money wisely. Ha ha. I mean, this is not easy. You know, this is the same city of New York who tried to put us all in Medicare Advantage. So if, however, it turns out that what Emblem's 20% cost is less than $15, that's when we want to be able to help you figure out how to recapture some of that money. One way is to, for example, if you go regularly for physical therapy or go regularly for blood tests, is keeping track of all this paperwork, which of course comes in months later, and then going back to the provider and say, I'm not paying you a copay this month because here is the documentation of all the excessive copays I have paid you over the last 3 months. Yes, Bonnie is reminding us that the copay kicks in after the deductible is met. So for many of you, it's only February 3rd. So for many of you, even those of you who go to the doctor or to outpatient health providers frequently, you are still meeting your deductible. So that's going to be the challenge, is how to not have to pay excessive copays. The bad news is we are stuck with, those of us in senior care are stuck with the $15 copays. The challenge is how to not pay more than we have to. And I think, Anne, it being whatever time it is now.
5 after 3.
5 after 3, and people have had a long meeting. We'll go at this again every session with some examples as people begin to get them. The other thing I have to say is that neither the union nor the welfare fund is the expert here. If you feel that you are being charged inappropriately, start with senior care. There on your senior care card, there is a phone number. Call and complain. I think one tactic on the long term can be to flood senior care with complaints about these copays and make their lives miserable. But only call if you genuinely don't understand or feel you have overpaid. The other place to go is the New York City Employee Benefits Program, which administers the supplemental health plans for retirees. Their email address and other information is on the retiree chapter website, and the best way is to email them as opposed to call for retirees. So Anne, I think I'm going to leave it there unless Bonnie wants to add something, because Bonnie's been both an active outpatient patient and like me, and tracking all this. There is no active lawsuit about this except the one that was filed in 2022, which was about the first time they tried to impose the copays, and There's been the judge ruled in the summer that the copays could go forward because the insurance had been the contract between the city and Emblem had been fixed. And he saw little likelihood that the plaintiffs would prevail on the larger issues of fighting to get rid of the copays altogether. So he allowed the city and Emblem to reinstate the copays. That's the details of that lawsuit, which mostly has to do with the plaintiffs who filed it at the time, are the only issues that are remaining. There's no active lawsuit challenging the current implementation of copays.
So Debbie, a couple of important takeaways, and I know it's very complicated. While we're paying the deductible, we should not be charged $15 copay.
Correct.
Save everything.
Save everything, right.
Everything that has to do with, your medical expenses, get a folder, get a box, get something and save it. And I know these are very hard to understand, some of these, and often they wind up in my circular file, but they will no longer wind up in my circular file because we're going to need every bit of evidence should we find that we are being overcharged. Those are the two main takeaways that I would that's reasonable. Third is, I think at some point we need this in writing. I don't know, Debbie, if you're willing to take the time to put stuff down in writing. Maybe we need an article in TTP. I don't know, but
I think, and that occurred to me as well. I think between Bonnie and myself, we can put something in writing. I think what we need is to go through, at least for my own case, I had a knee replacement in the fall, so I have a lot of stuff coming in from all these guys.
Yes.
Bonnie broke her arm. She's got a lot of stuff coming in.
Right.
So we have to begin to see examples that we can use. I think that's the most helpful for people is to see examples. So keep your materials, the main thing is don't refuse to go to the healthcare provider because of the $15. We've argued that we are very concerned that retirees will not seek the care they need because they keep having to pay these charges.
I see one question here, Debbie. Rudayan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. You have a question? We've got to unmute. Rudayan Lenang. Yes.
So now, every time you go to the doctor, once you've paid your what is it, $270, you have to give them a copay, or will they bill you for it?
It depends.
Mm-hmm.
It depends. For example, most of my providers are hospital linked, so they don't ask for the copay at the time. The hospital sends the bill afterwards. Some providers will ask for the copay up front.
Right, yeah.
You can say, I haven't met my deductible yet, I'm not going to pay it.
Well, I've already met it, but I just wanted to know because sometimes they say they'll bill you, other times you got to pay.
Yeah.
Upfront. Yeah. Okay, that's what I wanted.
Okay, thank you. Jack Hammond and Diane Mena. Jack?
Yeah, this is a question about a different issue. I'm seeing an acupuncturist who's not within Medicare, and I paid her a rather hefty fee up front. I assume I can get partial reimbursement for that. Is that correct? And if so, how do I do it?
Not if the person is not covered by Medicare, and I don't believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe acupuncture is reimbursed by Medicare.
No.
It is in some circumstances.
Well, then if it's in certain circumstances as prescribed by a physician, then what you have to do is call the employee. I would call the employee benefits program at the city and ask how to do it.
With the city employee benefits program.
Yes. That's where you go to the retiree chapter, look for the New York City OLR employee benefits program website link.
And I should call them.
Yeah, or email them.
Right.
They tend to respond better to emails.
To email. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
Yes, I think the problem, I mean, it sounds easy, like, oh, you have a deductible, and when you meet that deductible, then you start to pay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you go to the doctor, which I've been doing in January, you don't know, because each office sends its stuff to Medicare at various times. So they could do it every week, they could do it every 2 weeks, every month. So you don't know if you have, who has been, so you have to pay, unless you want to tell them I'm not paying you, you have to give them the $15 when you're there, because the staff doesn't know what's going on with you and your deductibles. So they say $15 and you give them $15, otherwise you have to, run out of the office. And so you keep those receipts because you don't know whether you've hit your, and then even if you went to this person on the first week and the other person on the second week, this person might get paid, and then this person's not going to get paid because he didn't put his paperwork in until that was, so you don't know. So you just pay and hope for the best and take your receipts, and then maybe you can sort all this out.
Right.
If you refuse to pay the co-pays, they'll kick you out of the office.
Let
Right.
me.
So it's all about, as Anne said, point 2 was just keeping all your paperwork and trying to sort through it. That's why I started by saying this is not good news. This is a lot of work and it's confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Debbie, and thank you for sticking with us as, one issue rolls into the next. We will definitely have you back next time, and we should have more time. Let me say something about.
Can I just add some, one thing is that if the doctor bills you $15 and then it turns out he needed to have billed you $200, he'll bill you 185. So, don't worry about that. Also, all of this, if you've thrown away the paperwork, if you have an online account with Emblem or with Medicare, you can get the same information online. So
Right.
don't.
Okay.
But it is the start of the year, so hopefully, the
It is the
paperwork's
start
only
of the
just
year.
beginning to appear.
Okay. Linda Iannuzzo, I read your message, and I will proceed accordingly. That's very cryptic, but it's only a message to me. So I want to thank Marcia Newfield, who I didn't remind, but I'm sure remembered that she was taking notes for the meeting today, and she's going to write up an article. Thank you very much, Marcia. For the March 3rd meeting, which is a month from today, the topic is labor in China. And we have 2 speakers. First, Eli Friedman from Cornell, and Jun Ju, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, from John Jay. And with that, unless there are any other important announcements, I don't see any hands. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Debbie, for staying over time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, of course, to Dr. Greene, and thank you to True Hearing USA. It was a very rich meeting. It has been taped, and in a few days you'll be able to have access and go over, everything that was said today. So stay healthy, have a good month, and we'll see you in March. Meeting is adjourned.